Welcome everyone to Unit 2, where we talk about the three big questions of macroeconomics. We already have known about the definition of economics, what are the main questions of microeconomics, so let's talk about what are the main questions of macroeconomics, which is the topic of our course. And through these questions, we're going to be introduced to the different topics that we will cover during our course. So, three main questions that macroeconomics is trying to answer. What determines the standards of living? What determines the cost of living? And why does our economy fluctuate? So let's go for the first question. What determines the standards of living? So in this question, actually, we are trying to figure out when do we call a country a rich country, when we call a country a middle income country, and when we call a country a poor country. Actually, this depends on the average income per person. So if we have the total income of the country divided by the population of this country, we will end up with the average income per person. Macroeconomics is actually concerned about the development economics. What makes some countries richer than other countries, and what makes some countries more unfortunate with a less income than other countries. Well, as you can see in this map, the average income per person is actually scientifically called GDP, gross domestic product, and this will be our first topic. In this topic, we're going to talk about how we calculate the income of the country, and we will know that it will depend on gross domestic product or the whole production of the country. In this map, which is actually constructed by the IMF in 2019, we can see the different incomes by countries in colors. So as you can see in here, we have the green area for the richer countries or the richest countries. The yellow grades and orange is for the middle income countries, and the red is for the low income countries. Rich club includes United States, Norway, Qatar, Australia, most of Europe. However, Egypt stands in the bracket between $2,500 and $5,000. I believe the latest statistics when we recorded this course was actually $2,700. Let's move it to the second question. What determines the cost of living? Cost of living is amount of money that an average family would need to cover its day-to-day expenses. Sometimes you go for a newspaper and you can see this nice piece of information that tells you that the most expensive city in the world is New York, or the most expensive city is London, or the most expensive city is Tokyo. Question is, how do they figure out that this city is the most expensive city? Actually, it depends on how much money do I need as an average family to pass through the month, to cover all my expenses in the month. Another interesting way of actually figuring out which country is more expensive than another country is the Big Mac Index. This is actually constructed by a famous economic magazine called The Economist. In this index, actually, we compare the price of Big Mac between the different countries, trying to figure out which country is more expensive than another country, or which country has a higher cost of living than another country. Big Mac is a standardized good that actually will find it with the same specification all over the world. So there is no room for the difference in quality or a difference in ingredients. So by comparing the price of the Big Mac over the different countries of the world, we can get a sense of how is the cost of living out there. Well, actually, the main concern of macroeconomics when it answers the question of what determines the cost of living is not the cost of living, it's the change in the cost of living. The increase in the cost of living is the increase in prices, which is called inflation, and this will be our second stop and second topic to talk about. When we talk about our topics, we will talk about inflation, how to calculate inflation, what are the flows in the measures of inflation, and the decrease in prices, which will be also part of our study will be called deflation. So until then, inflation is the increase in the level of prices in the country. Deflation is the decrease in the prices in the society. Now let's go for the third question, which is why does our economy fluctuate? Market economies, most of the economies of the world will face ups and downs through the time. By ups and downs, we mean that there is an increase in economic activity and then there is a decrease in economic activity, increase, decrease, etc. So what is happening here, this ups and downs that happens in the economy is called the business cycle. Fluctuations that take place in the economy from time to time. It is one of the main concerns of macroeconomics to define the business cycle and how it is, why does it happen, how to define it, and what is the role of the government to actually ease this business cycle. This will take a large part of our course in macroeconomics. We're gonna talk about the business cycle itself, how to define it. We're gonna talk about what is the role of the government to ease the fluctuation in the economy. We're gonna talk about fiscal policy and monetary policy. We're gonna talk about what is the explanation of this fluctuation. We're going to talk about the multiplier theory, and we're going to talk about the new classical theory, aggregate supply and aggregate demand. Well, let me give you some tips or some appetizers about the economic fluctuation and how does it happen. So as you can see in the graph, that was actually derived from Investopedia side. We have here the business cycle is actually a fluctuation in the GDP, which represents the production of the country. Sometimes the production is going up and sometimes it's going down and then it goes up again. So when the economic activity is going down, when the production is going down, this is called recession. Sometimes the media will call a severe recession a depression, and then when we go out of this depression or recession, we call it recovery. And then we have the expansion, which is an accelerating growth in the society or in the economy. We will talk in more details about the economic cycles in the coming units. Until then, be safe.